Hello, everyone, and please excuse my all the noise happening outside. Um, Not always a dreamy Sunday, but today is a good day. Welcome to the $3 bill Indigenous showcase panel, and I am super happy to be coming to you from Coast Salish territories. I am currently based here, but I am originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, Apache, Diné, and yeah, various lands. Welcome to me trying to get into the swing of things. Anyways, let us bring on our panelists. My name is Raven Two Feathers. I'm Cherokee, Seneca, Cayuga, and Comanche. And if we want to go in order of alphabetical order, because why not? Ivan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ivan MacDonald. I am an enrolled member of the Blackfeet tribe and born and raised on the Blackfeet Reservation, and currently live in Billings, Montana, which is historically Apselica or Crow country. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. Now, next to the now on to the what half of this panel is Blackwood Rose.
Hi, Oki. My name is Rose DeFarm. I'm born and raised here in Suquamish, Duwamish territory, but that's not where I'm from. My mom's mom was Siksiga. My mom's dad was Cowichan and Saanich, and my dad was Grobont and Assiniboine. And so I'm enrolled over in Sartlip, and I'm also enrolled over in Grobont and Assiniboine and Fort Belknap. And yeah, I grew up here in the city of Seattle. I've been going to Vancouver for film school, and I took the Indigenous Independent Digital Film program, and I got my diploma. I took the cinematography for film and video program, and I got my certificate. And then I took the motion picture arts bachelor degree program. And so recently I've been working towards my master's in film studies, and you know, also working in film throughout that duration, doing VR like research and learning more about 360 and AR technology, but also um, working as a cinematographer, director of photography, a director. I'm a member of the Directors Guild of Canada, and so yeah. But currently, I'm over in Seattle, coming to you from. I guess this would be closer to Muckleshoot territory, perhaps, where I'm coming from right now. But yeah, good to see everyone.
I'll
And
go next.
finally, all the way on the East Coast.
All the way to the T's. Nyamaskano, my name is Terry Jones. I'm a member of the Seneca Nation of Indians, and we're located about 30 miles south of Niagara Falls. And there's our Southern Territory, which is about 50 miles south of Niagara Falls. I'm a I'm a filmmaker. I went to film school later than youth. In 2012, went to Syracuse University. Studied film. I was the only Indigenous person in the program. I think we started out with 50. Graduated in 2016. I actually was a designated university scholar, which kind of means I was first ranked in my college out of 600 students. And so I gave a big speech in the Courier Dome. And then my time outside of academia was more or less learning how to promote my short films. They were mostly class assignments, but they ended up finding a lot of life in the film festival circuit. So it's a matter of like submitting them and then creating trailers and blurbs and movie posters. So been doing a lot of that. But most recently, I've taken on the role of curator and also being an advocate for that festivals or certain film organizations that screen films, that they pay screening fees to the filmmakers. We're kind of like the new kids on the block, where in terms of film, we the more traditional things like beading and all of whatever that embodies, it's something that's tangible. But as filmmakers, what we're doing is we're giving people an experience, and it's not necessarily something that's easily marketable. Aside from selling DVDs, but we're going away from that. And then streaming is a little bit of a platform that people are still kind of weary about. But most recently, Friday night and afternoon, I curated the Haudenosaunee micro short film program. The Seneca Niagara Casino was really generous. They brought in the filmmakers. They paid their expenses. They put them in a hotel room, gave them a panelist fee, and gave them a screening fee. So I wasn't anticipating being an advocate for screening fees, but I guess I'm just one little drop to hopefully move the needle to this sort of discussion. And when I say that, I mean it more for the festivals that can pay screening fees, not the ones who are struggling, like Indigenous independent filmmakers. We're all part of the struggle, and that I will more easily give my work away for free if it helps us in our mutual struggle. So, Yahweh.
Thank you, all three of you, for jumping onto this. I'd forgotten to mention that I have one of my films, A Drive to Top Surgery, that was originally a 360 piece but turned into a flat, so it can be in 2 dimensions, if you will, at the virtual Indigenous showcase this year. So that was super fun, and I hope that I made people cry in the good way and laugh and all of those things. And it's same with all the work that you all create and simply your existences. How has it been during COVID to not just exist, but to, let's actually go with that, to exist, to personally and artistically do things right now?
I mean, I can speak for me personally. So with regards to like a lot of mainly the main project my sister and I have been doing is our ITVS supported documentary When They Were Here, which is about the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Two-Spirit crisis within Montana, but through the lens of our family's history. And yeah, when we the pandemic first started last year, we had just gotten back from our ITVS summit in San Francisco, and the pandemic hit, and it was, of course, as many of you probably know, it was very severe on reservations. So our production was put on hold for well over a year, and we recently just picked up production recently. And so, I think that with regards to a lot of the projects we've been a part of, the feature-length documentaries and then the TV series, I think that a lot of it has been kind of put on hold with regards to COVID, and there's been definitely different protocols and kind of different lenses. And I think that we're at least Ivy and I, my sister, who's not here, she's actually speaking at another film festival, are very kind of cognizant of when we enter into communities where COVID has been, something that's ravaged, we're really trying to be cognizant and as safe and follow COVID protocols as much as we can. But yeah, it's kind of been the ebbs and the flows where we go up when we know that there's not as many cases, and when there's a lot of cases, we tend to stay away. So it's just been kind of this working pattern. But yeah, COVID hasn't been the best.
Rose, you've been bouncing all over and having to take trips and do the traveling that we usually always do. How's that sort of life?
It's made me be a lot more, I guess, intentional in what I'm doing and where I'm doing it, because I'm freelance. So like I have family in Seattle. I have other, like community in Vancouver and BC, and then I have my apartment over in Montreal, and so it makes me be very intentional about where I'm going and how long I'm going to be there, because normally I could be in like Seattle, Vancouver, Victoria, and then back again like within a weekend. And so um like thankfully I have my vaccination, so I'm waiting to book my booster shot in a couple weeks. And so um yeah, it's made me really think about like where I want to be and who I want to be doing work with, and I don't know, just making sure I'm being safe about COVID also like is a big thing for me. And like for a majority of the pandemic, I was just in my apartment in Montreal by myself, and so now I'm over in Seattle area with my family. And so also, just sidebar, something I'm going through personally is healing from a car accident, so I'm recovering from whiplash and concussion and shoulder injuries. So I'm just also just focusing on surviving right now and in my own way of like after a car accident. And thankfully it, like, you know, it could have been worse, but I'm still healing from it. And so I've been saying no to a lot of work, but I still, you know, I like to keep busy in my own way and working towards, like, I'm doing a lot of reflection right now. Like, I think that's one thing COVID has done, is forced a lot of us to really reflect on like a lot of the things I've mentioned, where you want to be and who you want to be doing it with and all of that. And so um, like I know a lot of people have gone home for since COVID, and then, you know, other make people have made a lot of big changes to their lives since because of COVID. And so like I know with my family, we've lost some relatives, and so throughout the pandemic, and then also just also losing other people in general, like through the non-COVID circumstances, and you know, just surviving that as a Native person is always a constant thing. Um, and so, yeah, like there's been a lot of grief through COVID, but I think with a lot of this grief, it's causing us to really focus on like the really like things you just really got to be grateful and grateful for and like celebrate. And so I think like more recently, because I've had my vaccinations, I've been going to different like community events. Like I went to a youth theater event for Red Eagle Soaring the other night, and I donated the beaded pickle earrings I made, and it made $120 for the organization. So I'm like stoked for that. And like, I don't know, it's just, but I was able to see people at the event, and that was just, you know, just really grateful to see their faces in person and not through Zoom, but or like whatever we're streaming from. But yeah, like um I don't know, it's definitely caused me to be a lot more introspective and thoughtful about like, okay, I have my goals, but are those still my goals? And so I don't know if anyone else is going through that, but that's definitely, I mean, I'm always like that in the first place, but even more so because of the pandemic, I'd say.
Totally. And speaking of only meeting up virtually, hi Terry, we still need to meet up sometime. But yeah, how has this been for you? I know you had that great VR piece that you pitched last year when we were in the Immersion Lab 2 fellowship. But yeah, how's life been since then?
Yeah, that was so. What's been, yeah, the pandemic has taken tolls in a lot of ways, not just human life, but even artistically in terms of our ability to do in-person screenings. For me, prior to COVID, I did a lot of community screenings in public schools and libraries, and my income just all dried up, and I wasn't sure how I was. Well, luckily for me, you know, I live here with my parents. I live on territory. They own their own house. Um, and so for us, like it wasn't like it's not like being in an urban area and you still have to pay rent even though your income's gone low. Didn't have those worries, so I was able to kind of subsist along the way. And it was the VR lab that was through through the National Film Board of Canada, Ford Foundation, and FCF or CFC. And that was where we met. I met Rose and I met Raven, and we worked on this VR project. And it was about a 4-month program. Not every day, but every couple of weeks we would meet up, and it was in a medium that I wasn't really experienced in, and actually was recommended to me by somebody who follows me on Instagram to apply. And I applied like 4 hours before the deadline, and I got in. And I think we talked during that as well, or where I shared, I'm like, I felt like I had imposter syndrome because the amount of group and talent that was within that VR and the scope of the project, just, you know, of course we all self-doubt ourselves. I'm like, but my project's just this little dumb game, you know, that I have this idea about, but you learn to work through it. And one of the most recent things that I did extend to push the boundaries outside of my comfort zone. Imaginative had a game jam in June. And I think maybe they recommended that I apply because of my concept of the board game that I had. So my team was, one was from Vancouver, one was from Hawaii. We never met each other. I didn't know each other. And then I said, why don't we do an indigenized game and I had to deal with land. So I'm like, why don't we indigenize the classic Nintendo game Zelda, and why don't we make Link an indigenous character who's in his community, surrounded by the outside world, and the outside world is now going to start to impede on their water supply, which impacts the land. And without water, land can't sustain humans, they can't sustain animals, they can't sustain plants. It's all this this oh, sorry, I blipped off for a minute. I'm like, can they hear me? Can they see me?
Yep.
No, but it was a great experience, and we actually won best concept. So it's kind of cool now, since not just being a short filmmaker, I have VR, I have VR experience, I have gaming experience, gaming development experience. But also what I've noticed is that film festivals have opened up their window. Normally, films have about a 1 year shelf life to go through the film festivals, but I noticed that a lot of them were opening up the years, a couple years up to 5 years. And so a lot of my work has been curated and found places to screen, and like in New Zealand and England and Finland, and I'm still amazed at how my work, its potential for work to travel outside the confines of COVID. And then just this past month, I was invited to do an in-person screening in Canada. So I was able to go across the border and do an in-person screening. Of course, everything was masked, everything was safe. The only time you took off your mask was more or less to eat or drink. And it was a great experience to go somewhere, because I hadn't been out traveling anywhere since June of 2019, when I went to New Zealand for an educational conference. And then I did an in-person screening at a local library 3 nights ago. I did a lecture for a University of Buffalo SUNY class, native cinema class. And then 2 days ago, I did a curated, and I hosted a film program called the Haudenosaunee Micro Short Film Program, which more or less is geared towards content that's less than 5 minutes long. And so that was in person as well. And it was really kind of nice to have people came in from 6 nations, and somebody came in from Minnesota, just to be able to be in the same room and to have this panel discussion. So luckily for us, we recorded one of the panels, and I'll be posting that sometime soon.
Nice. How has, and I am going to go off of the script of questions because I like the flow that we have in this conversation right now. How have you seen, and whether or not you're creating or absorbing media, how have you found that intersectional storytelling is helping you sort of fight isolation, if you will?
Quick question. I really did. I'm probably doing intersectionality, but I don't really know the what it embodies.
Mm-hmm.
Can you like give us
Sure. It's the place that two different two identities could cross over, say being queer and native, which, luckily we have the term indigiqueer now as well, or being Black and native, or disabled and native, or or simply how our storytelling is helping you through these things.
I'll go first. For me, I mean, when I think about that, and I in terms of intersectionality, that term, I think I have been living that, because in terms of who I am, who Terry is, I look at myself more like a Venn diagram. So the center of it is me, but I have these overlapping circles of different parts of myself, whether I'm gay, or whether I'm an artist, or whether I'm left-handed, or Seneca, Indigenous. What are my likes and my dislikes? But for the most part, especially when it comes to being gay, is that there's part of me that I haven't been able to publicly have in my Venn diagram. It's kind of been there, but it's kind of like in my piece, Untitled and Unlabeled. What I more or less say in it, and it's this idea of humanizing the other through my work, not just being gay, but just being considered other, is that I didn't feel different when I was growing up on the reservation. I was told I was different. And that's a big realization, or something stark. As a young mind, as a young person, you're developing, you want to fit into your own community, but then to have your own family, your own first cousins goes, what's wrong with you? Why are you so weird? And why do you love school and why do you love art and all this sort of stuff. And it almost seems like they were making me feel like I was doing it on purpose, and I wasn't. I was just trying to be myself. And so when I do create like my works, I have bits and pieces of that Venn diagram of me in it at that for that particular project, whether the content is historical or cultural or very personal, especially personal, that comes in. But I usually get a good idea if I've done something is after I create it, and then I'll render it out and I'll shut off the computer and I'll lay there. I go, Terry, what did you just do? Because I think that's the hardest part as an artist, is that you really are vulnerable. You have to put yourself out there. And sometimes when we're younger, we are open and honest. We can be open and honest, but that also can sometimes leave us open to be vulnerable to people who want to harm us. So as you kind of get burned along the way, what I've learned at this point in my life is that I've learned that I can still be very vulnerable and very open in my work, but at the same time, I've kind of had to learn how to set boundaries and how to have like these Spider-Man tingly senses when I feel like somebody's overstepping my boundary or something that's not healthy for me. But in essence, that's kind of how I would view intersectionality in my life.
Totally. Rose, you're simply existing. Well, I mean, everyone simply existing on set certainly helps. How has it been on camera team?
It's been interesting being like a Native woman and camera team because it's predominantly white men. Like when I was taking the cinematography program, it was like a significant portion of the class was male. Like there was only like 18 students, and 15 of them were men, 3 were women, and of the women, 2 of them were Native, and I was one of them, and like there was just like 15 men. Most of them were white, and like nothing against that, but yeah, it's just like I remember taking the Indigenous film program, and I'm like, wow, everyone's Native, but we're mostly women in that class, so it was a big like shift. Big transition there, but like I'm glad I'm glad that people are trying to be a bit more like I guess diverse and like inclusive, and but there's still like I guess barriers that prevent people from getting certain places. Like even joining the camera union, I'm still not a member yet, and part of it is because I don't have a driver's license in my car yet, and I'm working on it actively right now. Like I have a test booked soon, but like because of that, I'm still not a member. But that's also part intentional because I want to get my master's before I join the camera union, because I feel like if I don't get my master's before joining the union, I'll just never get it because I'll like be making good money and not want to go back to school. So like it's just let me do my thing. But like yeah, like it's been interesting also like going to school and getting my master's and being in Montreal where everyone's more French speaking and I'm very English speaking. Like I grew up in Seattle, and so part of that is like I guess I do at times have an American accent, and so in Quebec I definitely stick out like a sore thumb because I speak English just for that fact alone. But also they don't like, I don't know, like I've definitely encountered a lot more racism in Montreal than Vancouver and Seattle combined. Like in Seattle, they're like, "Oh, you're Native. We didn't know you people still existed." And then in Montreal, it's just like a complete like 180 of like, "Oh, we hate you because you're brown because you're Native." And like I've been like I walk around in my cedar hat a lot more often than not, and it has eagle feathers on it, and like a lot of places I've been, it's like, wow, your hat's beautiful, and then every once in a while I'll be walking around in Montreal, and then somebody will like spit after me as I walk by, and so, and then also like contrary on the opposite side of things, sometimes people will say like bon chapeau, which is kind of cool, but like so not everyone's all bad over there, but it's definitely a big shift I've noticed of like racism like on the West Coast. I kind of feel like it's still there, but it's more like, what is it, it's a bit more covert, and then over on the East Coast it's definitely more, at least for me in my experience, more overt and on the like on the top of things, and just yeah. So but also like navigating those spaces and not only being Native and trying to explain to people like, oh, I am from all these different places, and like I kind of like this is real like complicated thing to try and explain, but when people hear who my family is and all the different nations where I come from, it's like they recognize me. So it's just like people always want to know, like, oh, who accepts you? And I'm like, well, as soon as I start talking, like there was this time I was in Montreal and there was what was it, Adrian Stimson. He was performing in Montreal. He was doing a burlesque. It was cool. He was doing a burlesque performance, and he's a queer performer. And I was like, let's go see this. Like, yeah. And so my friend like suggested it, and so we went. And she was also Blackfoot. She's from Bugatti, and so we were like, let's go say hi. And so she said hi, and I was in the bathroom, and then I started talking with him, and he was like, oh, who's your family? She told me you're from Sixiga. And I was like, yeah, my grandma. I was like, she's Marjorie Studhorse. And he's like, oh, I know your grandma. Like, she used to come and visit my mom and grandma all the time. Like, I remember them sitting around and laughing in the kitchen. And so it's just like, he's like, oh, yeah, like, it's good to see you. Like, I feel like at home seeing you. And then later I end up going to, what is it? Places on the West Coast, and they want to know who my family is. And I tell them the names like Julia George, John Baptist Paul. And then it's just like, oh, yeah, I remember those people. And then it's like, my last name's Stiffarm, so as soon as anyone from Fort Belknap hears that, they're like, oh yeah, you're one of us. Like, so it's just like, yeah, like people, they see me. And so when I talk to Blackfoot people and I tell them, you know what my grandma said to me, and they're like, what? And I'm like, she said she's Blackfoot, my mom's Blackfoot, I'm Blackfoot, when I have kids they'll be Blackfoot, and so on. And I tell other Blackfoot people that, and they're like, yeah, that's what my grandma said too. I'm like, see, like, that's that. And so, but like, I remember this one time I was working a retail job in Vancouver, and there was a person who came in and they asked where I was from, and I told them all those places, and they said, what was it? Oh, you're too little of anything to be anything. And I was like, ow, like, I'm a person, that hurts. And then later I end up going to like Standing Rock, and I'm like talking to this person who I guess they used to be an AIM, but they were like, wow, you got a big territory to protect, I wouldn't want to mess with you. And so I'm like, I like that attitude. And so
Also,
like,
even
yeah,
though
and
they
so
would
it's just
say that
different ways of
they're
being and being seen, and a different way of like understanding. And like, I noticed that when I meet other people who have mixed identities, they really appreciate my work because it's like they feel seen too.
nice. And even though they were saying you were too little of anything, you were still too much for them to comprehend.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't know, like I try and figure out what it still means to me to be all of these things, but like I just want to keep making art and for other people to keep feeling seen by that. And so like, I don't know. That's part of why I'd make art. Like I remember one time in Seattle, I did meet a woman who she asked where I was from, and like she was thinking like I was from an island. I was like, yeah, Vancouver Island, and she's like, no, 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 I'm thinking like Hawaii or like Samoa or like the Philippines, and I'm like, no, 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 like think a little bit closer to home. It is an island in the Pacific, and she's just like, no, 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 it's something else. And she's like trying to think of like another island, and then I was on the bus, and like it was my stop coming up, and I'm just like trying to tell her like I'm Native, and she's like, oh, I didn't know you people still existed. And so it's just like one of the stories I guess of why I do what I do is because my dad, he told me, Rose, we live in a city and people from all around the world live here, like we always got to represent, like we, like in a census, whenever like people ask you, whenever people like always say you're Native. And just, my name's Rose Stiffarm, I can't say I'm not Native. Like I've met people in my travels who they kind of deny it until they can't anymore, and then meanwhile it's just there I am unabashedly like, oh, that's Rose Stiffarm. Like I just, like sometimes I hear people say my name a certain way, and I'm like, wow, like they make me sound like I'm somebody. Oh wow, that's cool. but but it's like they know that I'm Native as soon as they say the name, and I can't deny it. So I'm like I wouldn't if I could, but like I really can't. And like I'm always proud to be Native. Something I've appreciated about being in that Native youth theater program I was in, Red Eagle Soaring, is just um, they told us that we, you know, we should be proud of being Native, and that they were made to feel like they shouldn't be proud to be Native when they were younger, and they didn't like that, and that it was important for us to feel proud of who we are. And so it's just, I'm really grateful for that, like having grown up with that, because I know not everyone's received that message. And so, like, when I make work, I want people to feel proud of it. And I feel like when people see my work, they get excited. And so I don't know, they all take out different things from it. Like, it means different things to them. It can mean what they want it to mean for them. But like, I just want to keep representing. Like, my friend JB, the first lady in Vancouver, she made a song called Still Here, and she asked me to dance in it. So if you want to go check it out on YouTube, go have a see. But it's a good music video. But part of that message is we are still here. But she didn't just feature Native people in it. She featured other people of color and other people from oppressed identities to be in the music video. And I just thought that was so powerful. You know, it's just like, we are still here. And that's part of the reason why I still make art. And like, I'm healing up right now, but I'm also like trying to like plant seeds in friends I like heads, like, hey, let's actually like make some shit, like after like COVID clears up a bit and we can actually like get together again. So, and like travel, because like there's like, I like going down to Arizona and the Southwest and hanging out with my friends down there and making art. So but yeah, like I also want to do that here in Seattle. There's another friend I made from high school who I want to do some stuff with. And yeah, and like, we'll see. Like, I just like keeping busy, but the main message is, yeah, we are still here. Like, I want to keep making art so people know.
Yeah, totally. And I get you with the name. Ivan, how has it been over in Montana? I know there are various different state laws that are being put on the floor that are not always great for Native or queer folks. But in general, how's the work been? You're doing that talk about bringing the buffalo back. Yeah, so many different things that you're getting into.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting with regards to, so I have a background in policy work, and with my day job that was earlier the year, I recently parted ways to do filmmaking full time. A lot of those kind of ideas of intersecting identities definitely played out, and that's, you have the aspect of um, LGBT queer identity being under attack. I mean, Montana was kind of made national news this past year with regards to the anti-trans sports bills. And of course, Montana is always incredibly anti-Indigenous. So there's bills related around MMIW. And a lot of the work I focused on this past legislative session was with regards to bison and how bison are looked at and viewed, and the ways in which the cattle industry comes up against the bison industry. I wouldn't even call it an industry, it's revitalization. But yeah, Montana is a really interesting place where there's such a large Indigenous presence where I don't know if I'd say people listen more, but I think that just due to how many of us there are that are kind of involved in those levels of policy and government and advocacy and activism, I think we tend to do a good job of kind of making our voices heard. But yeah, Montana has always kind of been Montana. I've lived here only about 2/3 of my life. I mean, I was born here, but I've lived other places around the country, and yeah, I really enjoy Montana. Ivy and I always joke about how like virtually all of our projects have been within Montana. All of our projects for the foreseeable future will be in Montana, and I think it's also that idea, like, when you build community and kinship, and with regards to some of the upcoming projects we have within communities we're collaborating with, it's always just easy when you know them beforehand and there's an existing relationship. So I'm always telling ideas like, we don't really need to leave Montana to make film or make art or do anything. So it's always kind of nice to know what kind of have our place here and kind of our place based. And that's what I really kind of enjoy about working with my sister, but also working within the state.
Totally. I think we'll stick on you, and you can take a crack at this next question of how do you interweave those quote traditional aspects of life and storytelling into new mediums like film? Or, we had also talked, Ivan, about talking about VR and how to get into that and 360 video and really using that. So yeah, if all three of you want to talk on that, Ivan, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I think Ivy and I, who's my sister, I'll probably refer to her a few times because I kind of speak in the duality of both of us. But yeah, we've always have been really cognizant of kind of this idea of how Indigenous people, but particularly with regards to our current film, how Blackfeet people relay memory and history and time. And, with regards to our film, I think so many other projects, I mean, we've done our ESPN short and are currently doing the Showtime series, kind of centered around violence against Indigenous women, violence against Indigenous people. And, I think when you kind of tell these stories to non Indigenous people, there's always this specific kind of ABC of you have to talk about like jurisdiction and legal challenges and kind of all of that. Then you go into kind of like the history of colonization, and then you kind of have an outcome where people have a bit better of understanding. And I think with regards to my sister and I and our most personal project, our own documentary, we don't really go into any kind of context or history around that. What's already readily apparent. It's already readily apparent with the families and people that we're working with. We don't need to go into 100 years of jurisdiction or tribal sovereignty being eroded. We kind of start in the here and the now of how do families deal with this crisis. I mean, one of the storylines is of our uncle and our cousin Monica, who was kidnapped and murdered on the reservation 40 years ago, and kind of how do these families kind of live with this legacy. And so, I think that idea of kind of like traditional ideas or epistemology, it's just kind of interwoven in the fact that it's lived experience. So, I think I've told you too, Raven, like with my sister and I are Firelight Media Fellows, and Sky Hopinka is our Firelight mentor. And I think out of most of the people we've ever collaborated with, I think Sky has this really kind of amazing ability to make an Indigenous film rooted in Indigenous ideas and knowledge and history and oral history, but there's not like, so much context. Like I always tell, we had a conversation with him recently, and I was like, sometimes I feel like these big funders are expecting us to make Indigenous films from a non-Indigenous perspective with regards to how other communities, non-Indigenous communities, can understand film. I'm like, how do we make this film so that Indigenous communities, it's their context, it's their history, it's their understanding? And so, I think it's always that push and pull of how much context or history do you put in and how much do you leave out, and what do you lose out on not providing that context. But I think there's different workarounds, there's different ways, and yeah, it's always kind of this push and pull battle, which I actually kind of enjoy because I think it gives you an opportunity to present an idea in these very distinct and unique ways. But also kind of, it's always just, you always have to be cognizant of where your funding's coming from. So, you always try to present it in a way that, is easily digestible and is easily understandable, but kind of holding true to your voice. And I think Ivy and I have been really, really great to find like a lot of collaborators and programmers and funders that understand that. And so, it's just kind of trying to work through those different lenses.
Totally. Rose, do you want to jump in now?
Yeah, something I was thinking about. Sometimes I talk in like university, like for like a guest lecture kind of vibe, but one of the moments I talk about with them is in the film that I produced, A Red Girl's Reasoning. There's a moment where, like, let me back up. So we were screening this film at A Tribe Called Red concert, like in Vancouver, and the crowd didn't know it was going to happen, but we just thought it would be fun to do, and so we did it. But there was a moment that happened that people got really excited about, and it's a moment that I wouldn't have guessed that would have like got the crowd so hyped. But it was this moment where there was a tobacco exchange where it was just a pass off of a pack of cigarettes that goes quick in one hand and then it's gone. And the crowd, they went wild for it because we didn't have to stop and explain to them what that meant. We didn't have to say, pause. So right now we're making a tobacco offering. And what that means is, like, we didn't have to do that. It was just quick. And we knew that the person who made that knew what they were doing. And so when I think about, like, I guess decolonizing storytelling is, it's not having to stop and pause and say, like, this is what this is, and it's just knowing that it's knowing your audience and knowing that your audience is going to understand what that moment is. And if you don't know what that moment is, then maybe this piece of art isn't actually for you. Like, you can try to watch it as a viewer, an outsider, but we're not going to stop and explain and hold your hand throughout that process. And, like, that's something I've, like, I remember at one point at Concordia I did a presentation on, like, decolonizing art, and it was on it was funny, I was doing it on memes. And so I was talking about, like, decolonial memes, and it was like a whole presentation of, like, I don't know, like land back memes and like other stuff. But like one of the things I was talking about was some of the languages of the memes, they weren't English. They were like, I don't know, like Tlingit or Haida or like some sort of West Coast, and maybe this other one's over in like Diné Bazag, like the Navajo, and like there's this other one. Maybe it's in Mohawk, like, but it's just like they just like maybe it's in Inuktitut, and maybe it's in they're talking about berries and a seal. Like I remember at one point when that was in the news and CBC was that one seal meme that just went viral, and it's just like it's based off of the cat meme with the blonde chick, and like anyways, like I digress. It was about like taking a message and having it be for like a just certain audience, and like not stopping to explain to the viewer, if it's not for you, it's not for you. And like I think that's like how I like to incorporate like how I like to make my art. Like maybe I'll make a documentary and I'll make it a point to explain, but in terms of narrative stuff, I don't want to treat it like a documentary when it's not a documentary. I want to treat it more like the dramatic thing that it needs to be. And so I always think back to that moment of like, we didn't have to stop and explain to the crowd, and they went wild. They were like, ooh, like, and it was just a quick tobacco exchange. Like, I didn't think it would have warranted that kind of type of response, but the crowd appreciated that we took the time to just have them understand that they would know what that meant, and they did, and they were hype about it. And so it's just when you're really making your art for your audience, like, yeah, you do have to take your funding into consideration. Like, we made that project through Crazy 8, so it was like a film competition, and the prize was you get to make your film. But like, I think of that moment a lot, and yeah, sometimes things, maybe we just want to make art for just ourselves, and maybe other like non-native communities can enjoy it and appreciate it, but it can also just not be designed for them. Like, they don't have to be the audience also.
You remind me of an article. I don't remember who wrote it, but it was about the Yakuza video game series, and I think it's super fun to play, and it's really interesting because it is a Japanese game. Like, they are not going to hold your hand at all through any of it, and so my mind has been buzzing about how we do that. We certainly have the people, and we have the incredible flexibility and abilities of our people to do whatever we need to do to survive, to create, to be. But that's just my little rant about that. Terry, how have you been? You have the I was going to say the luckiness, but I don't know, the different perspective of being and growing up on the res. So how has that impacted your work and you? And
I have to unmute myself. I was burping and farting along the way. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's one of my first instances when I was told I was different. One was during Halloween. We went off the territory. It wasn't that far from our house. It was like five not even 5 miles away. But we went to this small town, or this town, where they said, oh, the rich people live there. We'll go there. They'll give us good candy. So we were probably like 5 or 6 years old, and I had a cousin there who was like 11 or 12. And we're young and naive. We don't know the real world. It's not until we get to experience it outside when we realize sometimes how harsh it can be. Even though through our television sets and commercials and cartoons, it looks like a nice place to be, and you get sold this ideal of like what beauty is and what happiness is supposed to look like and all of that. So anyway, we show up at this one house, and this old guy comes out, and he goes, non-native or white guy, and we go trick or treat, and he goes, are you guys Indians? And we go, yeah, trick or treat, holding our bags out. He goes, why don't you Indian, he swore, he's like, why don't you blah, blah, blah Indians just stay on your reservation? And we were like, but he goes, but I'll give you candy anyway. And we're like, okay, all right. But we're young, we didn't know. And my cousin's like, you don't want his candy. You don't want it. And, looking back now, that was like my first, foray into understanding what being different, or not just being different, but being indigenous, and just not doing anything. And yet he was, this whole idea that around where we live, I used to feel that they felt like all Native people get free money. We're all on welfare. We're all alcoholics. Like all those stereotypes. And, it was kind of hard to, being young and innocent and naive, to have those placed upon you when you had no experience or context to that. But for me, in terms of like my work at Torn Jersey Media, it's like my little upstart product or media company. But I'm in my trailer, I have we entertain first, you educate, and then you reflect. So, entertain, of course, anything needs to be interesting. And educate, yeah, and it depends on who my intended audience is. Sometimes you do need those goalposts for, if your audience is non-native, they do need some context. But then sometimes it's even, no matter who our audience is, we're educating them in some way, whether it's a character, what they're doing, or a certain circumstance, like, and then in the end, what we hope is that, for me, is like they reflect on what they had just experienced. And it's like those sort of three things are sort of what I keep in mind when I make my work. But when it's more for my, but the thing that I find a struggle with, and I think sometimes with Indigenous people, when we have our history, our language, and our culture, then it's like we have to, as artists, we push boundaries. But in some ways we're restricted, because a lot of our songs and our language and our culture is communal. It doesn't belong to me. It's not for me to, and I use the word exploit in a loose way, because and it's weird sometimes with English. Certain English words have certain connotations. You got to be careful how you say it. So when I refer to myself, I'm just a common Indian or common Native. I don't mean like, oh, it's like how you say it too. It's like I'm common. No, I'm an everyday man. And sometimes you got to do that, but explain it. But what I find is like when I did Soup for My Brother, my short documentary, I had my great-grandfather's voice in the background, and he was giving the Thanksgiving address. But I had it low enough where Native people, especially where I come from, they know what it was. They kind of knew what it meant. My dad explains it. But then for non-Native people, and this is what I think we all deal with, is this idea of culture porn, where they want, if it's an older guy walking in the woods, of course they want the eagles crying overhead and the wind blowing through his long hair and his old sage walking through. And so with that, and those things, I use it to effect, because then I defied them to hear that clearly. And it was only on my terms, in terms of how long and how much and how loud it was, it was going to be there. So in those aspects, it's like this, just trying to weigh out again, like who your audience is. But what I find the most freeing in terms of how I express myself is experimental, because there I have a chance to embody all that. It doesn't make sense sometimes in terms of a narrative, a typical narrative or a typical documentary. It can be a hybrid of both. I mean, I would have non-Native people and my own community going, what are you talking about? Or what is that about? But the nice thing about it is that they feel something. They feel it. It's just not so, I hate that word too, didactic. It's not just like, I'm just not spoon feeding you information to say, this is what I want you to think. And then in the end, hopefully, again, I hope you reflect. So.
Totally. and I think I'll also chime in on this one that it feels like sort of similar to how Rose was talking about, being intertribal and from so many different nations that it can be hard because there are conflicting teachings or um, finding ways to be a good guest on the land that we're on while also bringing in the aspects of our being ourselves as well. Um, I felt like some of that came through with the almost simple decisions that I made for and I use simple in a sort of off the cuff way of like, these things just came to me and it felt like it was something that I would expect to do or expect myself to do, in that, being as welcoming as I can and providing as much as I can for a piece that I recently did for Facebook for Native American Heritage Month. Of course, we have feelings on what it means to have a month, and I sort of instilled that feeling of, being proud every month out of the year, not just this month, but for other people, of course, to take time to recognize that this is a month and we still exist. But just being able to institute and be honestly trusted by both Cut and Facebook to do this project and to have them give me pretty much all the resources that I needed, it really changed how I looked at how industry works when they really want you to be a part of this and they really are committed to the stories that we're going to tell unabashedly. And so I'm curious to hear about what sort of either change in ethics or instilling of ethics you would want to see in the industry, or that maybe you even have seen and would like to simply see more widely. Ivan, I'm going to pick on you.
No, this is a really interesting question. It's a question I had, or discussion I had just recently for one of the projects we're part in. It's the idea of, um, non-extractive filmmaking. Like, what are you extracting from a community when you're from with outside? And my sister and I are even really cognizant of that. We work so much um, with so many tribes outside of Blackfeet within Montana, so we always try to be cognizant of culture and custom and language and history. And one of the things that we were talking about is like, how do you work within and with a community in a non-extractive way, a way that they help stead the story and they're a part of it. And we were talking about I'm really big on honorarium and honoring people's time and particularly emotional labor for a lot of the topics Ivy and I cover. So it was this discussion of and this was like another Indigenous person who's like, well, we don't really, is someone who's not a classically trained filmmaker. This person was like, well, in school we're taught not to give people money or not to pay people for time. And I was like, well, it's like, I would never go to like an elder's house or like another person's house and not bring something, even something small. And so it's always kind of that idea of, it's also like that historical idea of documentary as like, don't interfere with the subjects and that kind of idea is like, no, I feel like I'm building relationship and kinship and all of these things with these people. And there's people who we don't even really film with anymore, but that we're still connected with and still reach out and touch base with and connect with and help support in different ways. So I think it's that idea that I guess just distilling it down. I wish there was this more with regards to documentary and ethics. I wish there was this more emphasis put on that, on kinship and relationship and reciprocity and honoring people's time and labor. And I think that as I go forward, that's something that I'm going to do more and more with a lot of my projects, and it's hopefully something that we can see a shift in the future, honoring people for their time and their stories.
that's a good comparison for like you'd never go over to anyone's house without bringing something, and maybe even using that as the impetus for other people outside of the Native community recognizing that need. Rose.
Something I'm thinking would be like a powerful change in ethics would be to ensure that there's, I guess, more Indigenous people acting as the key producers and directors and cinematographers. And like, I think we're at a time that we have technicians and people who have gone to film school who can do the job that would really greatly need a job. Like, I think something that's very, I guess, timely is there's people like Michelle Latimer who have received an insane amount of funds to create content. And I think um, it would be more ethical to make sure that the kinds of funds that she has been getting make it to people who are connected to communities and their people and have like an ongoing relationship with these people. And it's not just a one-time thing, and it's like they are building their family with those people and they already have that family built up from a long time ago. It's not just a new thing where they're saying like they just want to come in and tell the story and leave and go and buy and that's it. It's just, I think, like what Ivan was saying, it's important to have um connections that like keep continuing throughout time with these people, because maybe what happens is like people don't like how they were perceived in that film, and they like maybe you need to re-edit how that footage ends up, or maybe something was filmed that shouldn't have been filmed, but maybe they need to make sure that other people don't see that. And so it's just, I think, like that kind of thing is important too, because I don't know, sometimes I'll be watching a movie and I'm like, oh no, this is a movie made by white people about Native people, and now I'm watching like these people try and reenact a sweat, and it just like, you know, it doesn't make me happy to see those things. Like, I'm just, I mean, I love sweats, don't get me wrong. I definitely need a sweat, but like I just feel like those particular things, maybe those things shouldn't be on film. And I think Native people know not to do that, but it's just when other people try and tell the story, like I think we are at a point where it's like now we have the Aboriginal People's Television Network in Canada, and in the States I think there's that network, what's it called? I
I
forget,
mean,
but
we
there's a
get
native one.
First Nation experience, but it's
FNX, the First Nations
yeah.
experience, yeah. And so like, you know, it's a time where we can really get behind the camera and like support each other and these collaborations. And like I don't know, like I think it's a good thing that Canada has a lot of funding, but I wish that there was more funding opportunities in the States. And I think that's something that I hope more people make a call for, because like I really think having funding for the arts, it really helps generate a strong like arts culture and art scene. And you know, it's so important because we're documenting like history, and essentially like whether it's a narrative sense or whether it's a documentary or experimental or whatever, like it's of the time. And I think, you know, like a well cultured society does have arts funding. And so I think that that is something that I hope the states will look more into. And like I know that there's perhaps a lot of casino money out there, and I've seen certain films funded by casinos before. So I hope that like more Indigenous businesses, as they um I guess flourish. Like I love supporting Indigenous businesses as much as I can. When I have money, I like to spend it on Indigenous businesses, because like I just think that the money should go back into the community, and then that money goes back into the community in so many other different ways. And so like I think I know people like throughout the pandemic they've been making like a lot of their time pass by watching like things on YouTube and Netflix and all these different streaming platforms. And I think that it would be really like people got really hyped for Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs. I know I'm like one of their biggest cheerleaders like about that right now, because like I like seeing ourselves on TV and like on these streaming platforms. And like it's powerful. Like it's nice to see somebody who looks like me on screen, and like it's so powerful. And for youth to just have that, and like not us as an adults just seeing it now, like them just having it always be like a thing in their life, that's so amazing. And I just want that to be able to keep happening. So like people like those shows, and then it's just like, but we need to be vocal about supporting that, because um like it's just so important to uplift each other. So often, like in a lot of these shows, they talk about like being lobsters or crabs in a bucket or whatever, and like pulling each other down. But like personally, I always love to like uplift people, and like just like that's why I'm like being so vocal about these shows, is I want us to, get out of the bucket.
Especially since that meme continued on with, "But who put us in the bucket?" What the bucket is the colonial construct. Anyways, we are slightly short on time, but Terry, I know you're gonna have some fabulous last words.
I'll do some last words. Quick thing is, yeah, I like this idea of land acknowledgement, but I know sometimes we feel like it's not enough, and it's like, how do we get those into action? And so it's one thing to say something, but as I said, it's your action. And I have an example of like when we have good allies. I'm a strategic advisor for the Native Spirit Film Festival in London, England, and then I'm also one for the Micromania Film Festival here in Buffalo. Or I'm not in Buffalo, but that's the one that's near me. But when Micromania, I think they're in their second year, they had decided that they wanted to have a Haudenosaunee film program as respect to open their festival. So they contacted me and asked me if I would curate, and I at first I was a little reluctant, but I agreed. But what makes them a great ally was that they knew enough to step back and just dissolve into the background. They're giving us they're giving us the opportunity. So I contacted all the filmmakers. I curated the program, and then it turns out the Birchfield Penny Art Center in Buff State, they agreed to host the program. And then so then when we came to present it, the face of it was just the program itself. And when it came time to present it, it wasn't like, we are giving you the space or we are allowing you into the space. We were just there. And that spoke way more than words. And it was just the idea of just like, they knew to step back. We didn't want some white lady running around and say, all right, Terry, what are you going to do next? And how are we going to do that? And what's it going to look like? They knew enough to stay way in the back, and the program went fine. And, it's funny that that one little idea turned into a bigger one, because that's where the CEO of the Seneca Niagara Casino was there. And he goes, we need to bring that to our casino. So I worked with them for 2 months, and it was the same exact program. They gave us the resources that we need, but this was way more. I mean, when we had the experience at the Birchfield, it was emotional, because we're like, we're not invited into these spaces, normally, and now we are. And this is our land. This used to be our land. It is our land. So it was more. It was more profound in that way. But for us this past weekend, when we had that at the casino, it was like home. And a lot of us had only known each other virtually, and the fact that we inhabited the same space, we all felt like family. It was like we all knew each other prior. And it's just sort of, in terms of my curating, I just kind of grabbed from here and there, and it's like this synergy, sort of like the sum of us adds way more than just our numbers. It wasn't just 12 films. It was like a movement. That's why I'm really excited about our discussion, our evening discussion, which was recorded. We talked about some really, really important things, not just specifically to Haudenosaunee, but to being an Indigenous creator in general, in terms of what we have to overcome. So,
Nice.
I hope I spoke fast enough.
Yes.
And succinctly.
There's technically no time limit, but I do want to be cognizant of people's time. But yeah, let us know. So I guess we'll do the reverse version again. Where people can find you and the stuff that you're working on. Terry, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I'll go first. I'm at Corn Soup Man. On most platforms, Instagram, Twitter. I think I'm Terry Jones on Facebook. And then my website is tornjerseymedia.com. It's like a torn jersey. It's an anagram of Terry Jones. And what I'm working on right now is my energies are. I want to go to grad school, and I'm applying to my alma mater, Syracuse University, and I'm going to an unnamed school right now in Canada. I'm applying to their grad school. The one thing that was worrying for me a little bit was how it would be referred to, because as Haudenosaunee or as Indigenous people, we don't acknowledge the border. So I'm like, am I going to be an international student? Am I going to compete for a spot with Chinese people and Indian people to get into this film program? So and it was nice with the university I'm applying to. They have a really great Indigenous support program, and I reached out to them, and they got back to me, and they said, no, you are going to be considered a domestic applicant, which for us on this side of the border, American border, with all the good stuff that especially that happens with the arts in Canada, and for me it was like imaginative, all these workshops and mentorships, and we're like Canadian, creators only. I'm like, you're like, we only had this in the States. So so that's what I'm working on. I want to go to grad school in the fall of 2022. I was going to apply prior, but then lockdown happened a year ago. I was struggling, like, do I do it? Are they going to be okay in September? I don't know. And when I decided not to, I had a sense of relief, which I think gave me a good idea that I made the right decision, and it is the right decision. So I'm right where I'm supposed to be right now, and I'm very happy and enthusiastic. So
Good. Congrats,
mm-hmm.
Rose.
Right now, I'm just in the immediate now. I'm just focusing on healing up and going to get treated in physical therapy, and I think I'm doing a lot better than I have been in the past few months, and so that's progress. And but there's still a couple more months of healing, I think. But yeah, I'm taking a break from my master's at this time to just focus on healing, get my driver's license, get my vehicle sorted out, insurance, and I don't have to tell anybody that cars are expensive. So I'm just trying to get that funded and going. And then I would like to join the camera union. That's my incentive to get my vehicle, is to join the union and become a member. And I was talking with somebody over the summer. They want to hire me as a cinematographer for a documentary series. I don't know how much I can actually say about that, but it has funding and $1 million in place for funding already. And so I'm pretty excited to be a cinematographer on that project. And yeah, just surviving a pandemic, like the rest of us. But yeah, eventually I want to get my master's. Like, I have another year or two to go on that, and so in the meantime, I'm just like the rest of the freelance folks, curious about job opportunities to work as a director of photography, cinematographer, camera operator, first assistant, second assistant. Like, I'm looking at joining the camera union, so any days in camera help me out. Yeah, and but also I like learning from other people when I'm working as an assistant too. But I also do like being the cinematographer and director of photography, and like that's where I'm most comfortable, and that's where I'm in my element. And so I'm pretty stoked to have a project upcoming as a cinematographer. And I have another friend who wants to do a horror film and have me be the cinematographer, and he wants to use anamorphic lenses. And I don't know how much I can say about that project either, but it's nice to have people wanting to work with me in that sense. And like, I'm excited to, I don't know, eventually play with all these lenses and lights and sculpt light and all that. So but yeah, one of the more recent things I was doing was teaching a film workshop about lighting, but also something I'm hoping to get in the works over the next few or several months is teaching youth film workshops. I really enjoy that, and like that has been like my major catalyst for why I have gotten so much film school. And like eventually I want to be able to teach university film too. Like, I like working, I like doing different things for work, doing different things in film. I like keeping my eye out for what IM4 is doing in terms of like their virtual workshops, because at least through the pandemic they've been doing a lot of virtual stuff. So I hope they keep that up in the future, because I think a lot more people have been able to access what they're doing from just outside of Vancouver, which I think is really cool. And they're usually working with software that people can download for free, so that's really cool too. But yeah, like, um, yeah, that's it for now.
Nice. And yay, all the things that we're making happen and that are happening and people are roping us into. Cough, cough, this. Ivan, let's go over to you.
Yeah, so like my biggest project, the one I'm passionate about all of them, but the one of course I'm most passionate about is my sister and I's first feature length documentary When They Were Here, which we're currently in production for, and we'll probably be shooting into next year. And that is a website, www.whentheywerehere.com. My sister and I are working on a feature length documentary about our tribe's bison revitalization efforts, the INI initiative, INI being bison and Blackfeet. And yeah, that's a really great project. And hopefully we'll have that one out sometime next year. And then also, we created a doc series with Showtime, which we're currently in production for, and will hopefully be out sometime late next year. Yeah, just other various projects in the pipeline, and um, really kind of excited to see everyone else's work. Always looking for cinematographers, Rose. So, so really kind of excited to hear everyone's work, and yeah, just yeah, hopefully more projects come to fruition in the next year or so.
Inevitably, they will. We are. I was going to say hot commodities, but we always have been and always will be. And yeah, that's the only pipeline that Native people want is an artistic pipeline. But I have my production company that I'm just getting off the ground. You can go to the splash page, which is at ravenandrelatives.com. Otherwise, you can find me on Instagram at raven_2_feathers, because there are spaces in between. That's the reason I put those underscores there, because everyone's like, is that one word or two? It's all separate words. But yeah, I was like, do I know the words for thank you in all these languages? We're going to go with the one from here where I am based, which is to Iguitsid, to all of you for joining. It has been wonderful. Thank you for sticking around to what's going to be 2:15. I'm sure there's so much other stuff that we could catch up on, but time is valuable. And this has been just made a little bit more valuable by spending it with you. And thank you to everyone who has tuned in, and stick around for more $3 bill content sometime. I'm sure you can find out on the website. But yeah, I appreciate all of you being here. Have a good rest of your Sunday.